We are live on YouTube. Now we're gonna go try to go live on Facebook also. Give us a few seconds, trying to go live on Facebook. And there we are. So, welcome everyone this afternoon. We have another exciting podcast. We have our guest here, Mitch Booth. He's the owner of Love Whole locally and also in Port Orange. I'll let him introduce himself in just a minute. What we're going to talk today about is medical orthodoxy. We're going to talk a little bit about clinical studies, how those medical trials are structured, a little bit about the biases and the flaws of those single drug studies. But we don't want to make things negative today. The purpose here today that Mitch is here to join us is to really educate our community here, because we wanted to continue to think critically when it comes to making medical decisions and when it comes to their health. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about comorbidities, vitamin D. It's going to be interesting. A lot of very useful information if you are into keeping your immune system up and avoiding any disease and stay healthy. So again, Mitch, thank you for being here.
You bet. We had a ball the last time we.
That's right.
We have.
We can go for hours, wouldn't we?
Right? I think that's the case. But
now, Mitch, we know you own those health food stores. They're great stores, but mostly instead of selling some great whole foods and great supplements, it's about educating the community, and that's where you've been such an advocate here in the community, because you do a lot of public speaking. You educate the people on what to do and how to stay healthy. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, but also how did you actually get into this field of nutrition and health? What got you into this?
Well, my wife and I started Love Whole Foods 30 years ago, and like so many people in the industry, it has a source with health challenges that were a major issue in my wife's case. And because of how aggressive she was in going to the first Whole Food store, which was located in Amherst, Massachusetts. This is in the mid 1980s and predates Amazon was not even a glimmer yet. Jeff Bezos, I don't even know if he was alive. And the key is that a family in Amherst was recognizing food as medicine and wanted to capture not natural foods. They were already seeing that the word natural had been co-opted by the mass food market, basically to introduce anything that, well, according to the FDA, if it's on the surface of the planet, this is a standard. If it's on the planet, then it's natural, or it would be alien by definition. That's basically how loose it was.
Yes.
And so the family that founded the original Bread and Circus Whole Foods went back to the way foods were grown before 1945 in New England. And to make a long story short, the miraculous recovery that my wife had led to a friendship with Dr. Bernie Siegel at Yale New Haven. We're in Connecticut. This is all happening in Connecticut. And Dr. Siegel was the first to recognize that if we are doing orthodox oncology, chemo, radiation, and surgery, which of course he did, then he had a better survival rate if he addressed nutritional deficiencies like vitamin D, like vitamin C. Dr. Linus Pauling had already won two Nobel laureates for the research done on vitamin C, which is still ongoing today with the Pauling Institute in California. And of course, Bernie plays a critical role because he was so successful they couldn't assassinate him.
Yeah.
And that is that all he had to say is, what are your mortality rates and what are mine? And that's really, to me, that's simple. It's real simple.
Yeah.
And for the people who shop at Love Whole Foods, which is a store, by the way, based on the original principles of Bread and Circus Whole Foods before it was bought by that other guy.
We don't care.
Yeah, the one that Bezos bought it from. In any case, when it was bought out by the corporation Whole Foods, then they changed the standards.
Sure.
And for anybody that comes in the store, we have a sheet that we've been handing out that lists what you find at Love Whole Foods and what you don't find. It's one that we've been using for 30 years.
Yes.
And the only thing that we changed on that sheet, by the way, is that we now check for genetically modified foods. And that's one of the reasons why we're having this discussion now.
Sure, the testing.
And what kind of science are we allowing these entities to experiment with and then introduce into the food supply without any due diligence, in my opinion?
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. So let's get into this medical orthodoxy. And the question is, for our viewers, what is medical orthodoxy? Explain this for our viewers.
But the medical, if you have a medical degree, then you are subject to standards, and certain standards dictate whether or not you can maintain your degree. Let's go back to Bernie Siegel. The only way that you can be an oncologist is if you practice oncology doing the 3 pillars, which is the treatment of the disease with chemo, radiation, or surgery. If you fall outside the realm of that, then the Orthodox authorities, and the analogy is to the church is pretty accurate, then you are excommunicated as it stands now. So that means that if you have an Indian oncologist, like Dr. Terry Limrod is a wonderful Indian oncologist that's at Baylor University. If you introduce using a traditional food, in India it's turmeric, then you are going to be subject to a lot of scrutiny. And so that's one orthodoxy. Another one is that if you have, let's take pneumonia. If you have pneumonia, medical orthodoxy is that the only treatment for pneumonia is large rounds of antibiotics.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's good if that solves the problem. But now we have a situation that we've all been struggling with in the last 3 months, and that is this new virus that has manifested itself in the form of a pandemic. And we have been told by the mass media that the only way that we're going to solve this is with a vaccine. And I don't have a problem. I want to establish clearly that I'm a big fan of vaccine. But I am a fan of vaccines where you know what the ingredients are that are in it. And I want to be able, as we encourage and have been for 30 years, I want to see
safety studies.
I want to see the published medical reference. And for those viewers here that all have one of these, go to PubMed. There's the listing. So if we have a vaccine, I want to see how many studies were done for its safety and efficacy.
Well, we both know there weren't one, right? We both know these safety studies weren't done because that's why we won the lawsuit.
Well, there are games that are played.
Yes.
And what happens when you study a particular drug and you only study it for 6 months? And to the viewers out there, the FDA approval that was given for Roundup as a broad spectrum herbicide, would be shocked to find out that the studies were based on 6 months.
Yeah.
And we can get into a discussion on that, but why is that important that we address it for the ability of our listeners to decide when this vaccine is presented, you need to know that it will be derived from gene splicing. This is not going to be a vaccine of the one that we've been used to in, let's say, the swine flu, which was derived in a traditional vaccine way, where you take a small amount of the infected virus from, in this case, the host was the swine, and you take a minute fraction of it and introduce it into the body, and the body builds up and or for the people of my generation, polio, the same, which was a breakthrough. Mm-hmm. Who's going to argue with that? But we're not talking 1950 anymore. What we're talking about is that incredible explosion, this Pandora's box of the understanding the mysteries of the building block of life, which is the RNA, DNA helical. So when we look at Monsanto wanting to develop an herbicide, right? Understanding how the plant works and taking out of the plant a particular gene sequence, which was critical to literally maintain the life of the plant, right? Mm-hmm. And extract it or bind it up. In the case of Roundup, what it is, they use a glycine-like molecule. That's why it's called glyphosate, right? It's a glycine molecule that's synthetic copy, but it's a synthetic copy with an extra nitrogen hook on it, so it's not identical. But when you splice it into, when you spread that glycine on any green plant, mm-hmm. A plant meaning it's taking in carbon monoxide and excreting oxygen, right? When you take out that gene, you kill the plant, all plants. It's a very democratic condition. And by the way, is this, where is this? This is Babel, right? Now, I would suggest that everyone listening, Google Dr. Stephanie Seneff, two PhDs from MIT, two PhDs, the head of artificial intelligence. And we had her speak a year and a half ago mm-hmm. on the porch before this whole pandemic thing. And what's amazing, because everyone listening is aware of the fact that there were, before the COVID hit, it was in the news, the number of lawsuits that were involved with people that were saying, the food that I'm eating is disrupting my lymphatic system to the point that I'm developing a cancer, a lymphatic cancer called non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Yes. And our listeners want to understand that this isn't chest beating. We need to know that there were a number of epidemics going on before COVID hit. Mm-hmm. We're here having a discussion only because those other pandemics didn't go away. That's one of them was obesity. Pardon? Obesity. Another one was heart disease. Although that's been very much improved because we stopped smoking. So there's you want to see at least one of the shining stars on it. But it's not just obesity, but it's diabetes. And they're the same. They're the same matrix, typically, mm-hmm. not in every case. But the other one is mental illness and opiate addiction.
Autoimmune diseases.
Autoimmune. And what was fascinating about the Seneff program, and by the way, anyone listening, anyone who comes into the store and says, Mitch, what was that DVD that you were talking about that changed your life? I made copies of it. Come on in, I'll give it to you. You watch it and you will not be able, if you're an American, you will not be able to sit still in your seat and say, how did this happen? How did we allow the manipulation of our food only because, well, let's take corn. We make Roundup ready corn, right? Well, the farmer is using the Roundup to kill the weeds so that the corn crop doesn't get overwhelmed with the pests, right? Well, that's fine, except that the corn's being sprayed with the Roundup. It kills the weeds because it gets into it's called the chicomate pathway, which is unique to plants. And but not into the corn, because they've had the part that is the corn gets affected by the glyphosate has been spliced out. Another gene has been put in its place. So you have two problems. One, the corn's being exposed to a standard urban, think DDT food. Yeah. Same thing as DDT, except much more dangerous than DDT. But the second is that you eat it. And then that glycine molecule goes into your body and it causes disruption. The point of today's talk was, however, to just talk about how scientific studies are done. And in the case of the FDA and glyphosate, the FDA does not conduct its tests. It turns to Monsanto and says, turn in your study. Right? And if you say that there were minimal side effects, that it's generally accepted as
they accept that.
And they accept that until what? Until people start dying. A good example of that would be anybody that remembers same period of time, by the way, when Roundup was introduced, not as a herbicide in the 1980s. It was originally approved by the FDA as an antibiotic, which we'll jump to that in a second, as an antibiotic. But at the same time, there was a tryptophan debacle, and my industry had been selling tryptophan for decades since World War II. Since tryptophan was discovered during World War II, right? And then all of a sudden there was a situation where people were dying. And the FDA said, well, we got to reevaluate all this. People are dying. So what did they do? They removed all tryptophan. They didn't invest well. I won't get into conspiracy theories, but why didn't they investigate if there was only like one group of people doing one tryptophan as opposed to all of them? And of course they didn't. They just out of hand banned tryptophan. You couldn't get it until after the Great Recession. Yeah. And again, by the way, that's an interesting story because the tryptophan that killed about 2,000 people and crippled a couple of hundred all came from one source. It was called Shodenka, the largest pharmaceutical company in Japan. And guess what they were doing? The first gene splicing experiment. Yeah. But that's another.
With this Roundup, though, there's no direct consequence. In other words, if I eat something with Roundup, I'm not dying tomorrow. So it's going to be much harder to indicate because this is a toxic buildup that causes Hodgkin's lymphoma and all kinds of other
lymphoma takes 10 years.
Exactly. Right. So that way they're going to get away with that for a long time.
Right. And it wasn't until the 4 trials in California that it was determined that many of these studies that were turned into the FDA came from the ghostwriting department of Monsanto. That's a separate issue. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that's a criminal activity. And the end result is tremendous punitive damages as a result. But your point about slow toxicity and not being able to identify it, another one of our epidemics is Alzheimer's disease. But you don't just get bitten by a tick and like in the case of Lyme disease, your joints hurt. Alzheimer's takes about 10, 15 years, about the same amount of time that we're seeing where Roundup was introduced into crops, into the food supply in the 80s. And I know that only because of the work that we were doing at Yale New Haven Medical Center. Mm-hmm. But Senef is the one that actually is in 2 of her books, and they're available online where you can go to Dr. Senef CSAIL at CSAIL MIT. Just Google it, Dr. Stephanie Senef, and you'll get it's CSAIL, C with a capital C, SNAI, sail, like you're sailing a boat, SAIL. So in any case, she's the one that actually shows what happens when you just add that one nitrogen tail to the glycine and how it fools the brain into utilizing that glycine instead of the glycine that's found in sugar. So we go back again to food as medicine. When you buy organic food, The organic is still the only definitive standard that gives our audience the ability to say, well, you know, that Roundup, if I had a choice, and they've done dozens of studies, that for the female shopper, if she has a choice between GMO-free corn chips and Frito-Lay corn chips, it's like 5-1.
Yeah.
They will take the GMO-free corn chips. So, and so I'm very proud of that. I mean, it added to our list now is that we
scare people, even though they're not educated, it still scares them, right?
Right, but you can have a GMO-free product and still not have it organic. And so I need to emphasize that the organic is still a standard that we're very proud of at both stores.
It's basically, I mean, many times the GMOs don't have to be labeled, so the only way to be sure to not have GMOs is by organic, correct?
And we now have Watchdog, the non-GMO project is a good one. I don't have a sample of it, but anybody that comes into the store, we even give tours. If you want to see where you can get a pasta, where you can get a snack chip, or even in our protein shakes. And I'm very proud that we screen our protein. The Love Whole Foods protein shake that's a whey protein, both the vegetable. We have a vegetable protein and a whey protein. The whey protein is from grass-fed cows, and they're certified to be grass-fed, not taken out in the field for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
They're certified grass-fed cows, and again certified that the whey protein is contaminant-free. We do that, and then of course on our grain-based protein shakes, again multiple certifications showing not only organic but also GMO-free. And then when it comes to coffee, my favorite subject, coffee is the most heavily fungicided agriculture in the world. And so, and again, because everybody, the alternative doctors love to say, you got to stop drinking coffee, right? Well, to me, coffee is the elixir of life. In moderate, always in moderation. But it's getting it again where it's GMO-free, but also pesticide-free. And then you do fair trade. I mean, those are the kinds of things that we try to bring awareness. You also end up with a better cup of coffee. And I'll say that about the corn chips and the salsa.
Yeah. To go back to those studies, what are the biases and flaws of single drug studies?
The reason why there's a disconnect between the mind, body, spirit that we promote at Love Whole Foods. It's a triumvirate.
Sure.
If your body's not healthy, your mind and your spirit are not capable of reaching their full potential. If your heart's been broken and your spirit's down, your body's going to manifest it. We understand that. We understand that in the food that we sell, let's take an avocado. The avocado doesn't do one thing, it does a dozen things. If we look at the sheet, the health benefits, omega-3 fatty acids, and I might also add that again, we have the PubMed, that it doesn't do one thing, it does 24 things, right? But in the pharmaceutical world, everything is narrowed down to doing one thing, right? So, but the only problem is it doesn't mirror the at least my philosophy, which is so above, so you find below, right? They're doing it because of what drives the pharmaceutical industry is a ability to get an exclusive patent. And the problem with that is it's patent-based. So if you're developing a cholesterol-lowering drug, then that's what the focus is, and it's one chemical compound. And that compound, in the case of lovastatin, is patented. And then no one else can copy that. At least they're given an exclusive for X number of years.
There's a great side note to that, or especially in the case of statin drugs, I call it surrogate endpoints. What it means is, yes, the drug ends up lowering the cholesterol, but it doesn't help anybody because there's no definitive relationship between high cholesterol and heart disease.
Right.
So the statins have not saved one life. To the contrary, they have cost many lives. So I call it a surrogate endpoint, like many diabetes drugs. What do diabetes patients do? They measure their what? Their blood sugar. How is that related to insulin resistance? It may not impact the insulin resistance at all. So it's a surrogate endpoint, right? It's really
well,
not.
I'm glad that you mentioned that one because it illustrates perfectly what happened in the mass media, which is another element that everyone watching this program needs to wrestle with. And that is that you can't make an informed health decision, right? So I've got my body and I want to make the optimal choice, but I'm inundated with information that says fats are bad, fats are bad, fats are bad. Well, and I just need to tell you that that was orchestrated very much on the same level as what Monsanto did with their ghostwriting and folks, this isn't ghostwriting. Just look at the transcripts of the trials, all four. The jury of peers all listened to the information and said, that's not science, that's cooked science. Or as Stephanie Seneff would say, remember that the best scientific principle that you need to remember is the invisible magnetic field of money.
Yeah.
and when you introduce that, when we look at levastatin as being one of the top 3 selling drugs, except that it's gone generic. So this is interesting. This is very interesting. Patent's gone.
Expired. Yeah.
It's expired, right? So and then whenever a drug goes to generic, you can't make any money on it. Oh, and by the way, the generic drugs are all made in...
But what they do often then is what? They use the same drug, so they don't have to go invent a new drug and get a new indication. For example, if your drug over the years shows that people get sleepy, then the next time when the patent runs out, they get another one for insomnia. And that happens to many, many drugs.
Absolutely. Or they'll take a drug. What was the one I was reading? It was a psych med. It had to be like Xanax or something. And again, the patent on Xanax is, and we have an epidemic. We know that we have an epidemic with diabetes because there had to have been like 5 drugs on lowering your A1C. You know, it's an insight there. But what they do is they'll take it, the patent's expired. And so then they'll go and they'll add another molecule, another nitrogen, something new, and then go back and repatent it. And the only tragedy of that is that it perpetrates this. But in the case of the statins, what's happened is there's so much overwhelming. On this sheet on omega-3, there's a whole website. It's called omega/research.com. There are 40,000 studies on the myth of cholesterol. The myth that somehow cholesterol causes all the maladies that we're facing. And indeed, we're finding out that lowering cholesterol has been a contributing factor. There's been this perfect storm. The lowering of the cholesterol has contributed to not only Alzheimer's, but also just standard dementia.
Well, if you just look at cholesterol, it's a vital substance. It's produced by the liver to do so many things. It's involved with all our hormones, increasing the cell fluidity of every single cell to absorb nutrients. I mean, it's a vital substance. Without cholesterol, there's no life. So again, it's this manufactured thing that they come up with, right? And
there's no point in being negative about it, other than that we learned the lesson that George Santayana taught us. George Santayana was a brilliant philosopher at Harvard, and everyone listening probably has heard his expression, and that is that those who don't learn the lesson of history are subject to being punished by that mistake over and over again.
Yeah.
And that's, so, you know, you don't get, in the case of the statins, they're not being reperpetrated because there have been enough really good doctors, non-Orthodox doctors, integrative physicians like yourself. I'm thinking of Dr. Bradenson at the Buck Institute at UCLA Medicine. Nobody questions Bradenson. Nobody, because there's nobody that knows more about geriatric brain neurodegeneration than he does. And so, you know, suddenly it's not popular. Or what I find more, what if you talk with doctors at social events, it's not sexy.
Yeah.
Right. So we take for a urinary tract infection, you do cranberry juice extract to re-establish the lining of the urethra so that the pathogenic bacteria can't stick to it. It's real simple, right? Right, and it works.
Yeah.
Doesn't, right? But we have Cipro. We have a new broad spectrum antibiotic,
yeah.
right? Well, that's sexy because it's new. We're cranberry juice. Are there any scientific studies on cranberry juice? And of course there are. Just go to PubMed. Is Lester Holt going to talk about that? No, it's not sexy. You know, we want the breakthrough.
Plus, it doesn't make money.
And I hate to say it, but with all of us sitting here, those that are joining us in this program, we're all sitting on the edge of our seats waiting for them to come up with the sexy vaccine. I'm
certainly not. But why do we need a vaccine if 99.8% is resolved by itself? It doesn't seem like we have a big problem.
I will take, our buddy Fauci, who, by the way, goes all the way back to HIV again in the mid-1980s. And the purpose of this talk is to remind us that there's good science, there's mediocre science, and then there's proselytizing. There's science that was bought
for their agendas.
They have agendas. And my only concern with Fauci making the pronouncement that this virus it behaves in such and such a fashion is that I want to know what financial stake he has in whatever is brought. When the vaccine is made available, I'm going to simply say, I went to see Mitch and he gave me a nice printout on his vitamin, right?
That's yours.
What's in it, in what level, on every micro, and then even another disclaimer that it's got some magnesium stearate. That seems to be a big problem, except that magnesium is incredibly deficient in the American diet. So
yes.
I won't get into that. We do that. I want to know what that is on the vaccine that they're going to be bringing.
We both know it's not going to be there.
Well, then I'm giving permission to everyone here. It's mind, body, spirit. One of the reasons we're seeing the social upheaval in the greater society is that the corporal America, the body politic of America, is out of balance on the mind, body, and spirit. I'm not trying to get on a stump on it, but what is above, you will find below. If we are not addressing these various other epidemics, especially the ones that have a comorbidity rate to the virus, then we're in really big trouble. But on the other hand, if we do social distancing that just makes sense, that you don't go to like the bar in Gainesville that now has been identified as a nexus point for contaminating 150 people, then I can only say that we at Love Whole Foods are hoping to practice the intelligent decision-making based on really good information, but also common sense.
Critical thinking.
Right. We're not wearing a mask. And the reason we're not wearing a mask is we need to be able to talk to each other. You know, if you've got, if you know you've got any degenerative condition, you know, sinusitis, which is about to become a problem because we've got the Sahara Desert cloud
it's coming, right?
that's going to inundate us, then as a courtesy to another American, wear a mask. But if you're not sick, you know, the hypoxia is a very real condition. I've lost one of my best employees because she suffers from a mental disorder called claustrophobia. Is she a nut job? No, it's endemic, but the amount of stress that's going on.
Sure.
So what we're trying to do is, again, build a commitment that there's a respect for that mind, body, spirit. Well, if the woman's got a mental condition that's called claustrophobia, then we need tools that in my work, her brain's not missing Xanax or whatever.
There's no such deficiency in the human body.
Right. Benzodiazepine is very effective, mood altering anxiolytic, but that's not the solution. Now, on the other hand, when we talk about chamomile, which every boomer out there knows, we now have the studies that show. Now, do we have studies that show that chamomile works as good as Xanax? No, because no one's going to pay for the study.
Exactly.
But we were talking about Terry Limrod. So in 1987, Terry Limrod introduces pharmaceutical grade St. John's wort. Mm-hmm. And I still remember the day my wife and I came to work, and it was it's like 8:45. There were 20 people lined up in front of the store, and I thought, whoa, either the plague is here or something, right? And it turns out that there was a 60 Minutes had done a profile, just like CNN just did the one on CBD, which again, let's not go off on that tangent, right? Although worthy of another discussion. But the St. John's wort was shown to be in clinical trials more effective than it was when they did it against Valium. But it was others. There were other benzos that it was tested against, which then led to the British system, the British medical system, which is was worth the discussion in its own right, where their orthodoxy was that if you have somebody with mild to moderate depression, the first step was St. John's wort, not a prescription drug. And that's all we're talking about. I'm not opposed to drugs. But why would I take a drug if I can do
something natural?
If I can do something natural. And again, going back to the St. John's wort, I knew about St. John's wort because my hero was Dr. William Culpeper, the founder of the Culpeper herbal stores in England. He practiced medicine in 1350, which is another story in its own right. He's the man that took the Gutenberg Bible and said everybody has a right to know the information of these therapeutic plants that are being given to the king in the Royal College of Physicians. And he's saying, well, I don't have a problem with the king, but what about the poor schmoes?
Yeah, why can't they access to the herbs and plants?
And of course, and by the way, the reward for that was they kicked him out of the Royal College of Physicians. Just nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. But let's go back to the St. John's wort, because I'm very proud of the fact that we do pro bono work with our servicemen and women. Gulf War, Vietnam. I have a couple of clients that are even Korean War. But one of the most amazing stories I ever had was a Korean War veteran that lost a leg. They got blown off. And he suffered from phantom leg syndrome. And the only thing that gave him, he literally would have a leg that would itch. And it would drive him crazy. And St. John's wort alleviated that, again, in the vernacular of 1350, it was called a nerdine. It was a soothing herb that affected the nerves. Especially for people in 1350, there were a lot of people with sword wounds.
No, I believe drugs can be necessary. If I get in a car accident, if I fall from my roof, I end up in the ER, please give me something. But to me, drugs are only short term. Long term, they always gonna have a detrimental effect to our health. And it also shows that if you take them long term, you're not addressing any cause of the problem, you continue to mask symptoms. So short-term use, I'm okay with. Short-term use, I'm certainly not okay with, because we're masking symptoms. A conventional doctor always, fails to wonder what the cause is of those symptoms and really work on the cause. When it comes to drugs, Mitch, too, is because you talked about St. John's Wort compared to antidepressants and the benzoids and stuff like that. Well, from what I know, every drug is basically, or every drug company has looked at Mother Nature, at a plant or a herb or a food, and says, okay, this plant or food is helping for this in those ancient cultures. So let's look on what active ingredient in this plant is actually causing that effect. Then they find that molecule or molecule fragment or whatever. Then they're gonna do what? Make a synthetic copy of it, like you explained. And now they can make a patent, because remember, they can't patent a plant or a herb or anything from Mother Nature, anything that's natural, as you explained. And that's the process. So if you know that process, you know that there's always a better natural alternative that does not have the side effects of the drug. Why does the plant not have the side effects? Because it's synergistic, it's holistic. Just like a snake has its own antivenom, right? So always you can deduct any drug and you can find a natural alternative that has not the side effects and it's more powerful. Why is it more powerful? Because the plant is alive and the drug is dead matter. Simple science, dead matter cannot act. Dead matter only can be acted upon, okay? So even if you look at the side effects of most of your drugs, they're the same. They're nausea, vomiting, lightheadedness, rashes. And what are all those symptoms? They're all attempts of the body to expel a toxin, right? So they may have some short-term effect on the body, but in the long term, they cannot do any good to any living symptoms because they're dead matter.
Okay, everybody listening knows all the story of the hydrochloroquine.
Yeah.
How many of the listeners are aware that that drug, which by the way was a revolutionary discovery during World War II, malaria killed more soldiers on both sides, on the Japanese side and the Allied sides, from Australia, British, American. Malaria killed more soldiers than any accumulation of guns and bullets.
Yeah.
What is it? It was a derivative of a plant that grows in a couple of different places in Southeast Asia. It's the coquina plant. And the British discovered that when you took it and you distilled it in, let's say, vodka or gin, that the component of the plant, which we now identify as quinine, was very effective as an anti-malarial drug.
Yeah.
But again, we've already had the discussion on how it gets changed. My argument with the science and what we just witnessed with this last 3.5 months, how do you take a drug that's been probably one of the most miraculous drugs in the history of human history, and suddenly dismiss it or assassinate? What I call assassinate, what they did was they basically, that the side effects on the heart were so tragic, and I'm thinking, well, what about the poor bastards in Burma or whatever they call it now? It's not called Burma anymore, but somewhere in the tropics, right? Oh, they're going to suddenly stop taking the drug?
It's been on the market so long. It's been approved. They approved it.
And granted, doing things off-label, which is what the president was doing, except that we've now studied quinine, and I might add to everybody listening, we sell a wonderful drink It's called Q-tonic. But it's not a drug. All it is that it's like doing birch bark beer. What's birch bark beer? You take a lot of bark from a birch tree and you soak it, in this case, apple cider vinegar or something, you distill it. And the equivalent on the quinine is the same. Now, if you're fighting malaria, it's not going to be enough to just do a refreshing beverage, a gin and tonic. But the key is that because the medical system only studies one element, right? They forgot to ask the president, was he doing anything else besides the hydrochloroquine? And the answer to that, by the way, is yes. He was doing it with zinc. And for those
listening, with zinc, it's always been the recommendation.
Right, but it's the zinc that has the antiviral properties. Yes. The hydrochloroquine
allows the zinc to enter.
Was allowed it to go. We have a name for that. It's called an ionospore. Not ionosphere, ionospore. In an ionospore, there are a couple of them in God's medicine. By the way, they don't occur in the pharmaceutical world. An ionospore changes the connectivity of the molecule so that its polarity allows it to be able to go into the center of the viral protein. It's a protein. And the zinc tears that protein apart. We don't know the mechanism of how the zinc knows that it's an entity that's a pathogen. But when it does, it rips the RNA DNA apart, it unbundles, and what do you have? It's called an antiviral. Interesting. But of course, anybody that's listening and thinks that I'm not telling you that the president is taking it, when there was this huge uproar about it, I just said, well, his heart, I know his heart's okay because he told me it is. And that literally tens of thousands of people are taking hydrochloroquine for a whole unrelated level. What would be interesting to see and to do a study is how many people taking hydrochloroquine for malaria living in Southeastern Vietnam and in Thailand and in Laos, which is where all this malaria that we brought back with our troops. How do I know that? Because I do pro bono counseling with Vietnam veterans. They're still struggling with malaria, which is a terrible disease. But they get relief. Nobody's looking for a cure. But the point of this is the science is skewed because there isn't a money incentive. When what we should be doing is saying, well, I don't know what they were claiming, that people that took it wasn't effective. Maybe they took it too late. So maybe it's not a part of the orthodoxy if you're 30 years old. That you don't give it to people that are in their 80s that already have congestive heart failure. Well, don't give them hydrochloroquine, right? But my buddies who are all hanging out at Gainesville because they haven't got anything else to do at the bar, right? Well, maybe they all ought to do a shot of hydrochloroquine with zinc, right? And that's not a conspiracy. I don't know anybody. I'm sure that I'll get messages on my social media now, but my bigger thrust would be we don't sell hydrochloroquine. It's a drug. What do we sell?
Zinc.
We sell zinc, and we do Dr. Hans Nieper's zinc orotate, right? So it's not zinc oxide, which is what you get from cheap Walgreens kind of vitamins. I always remind people Walgreens are where you go to get drugs, right? That they sell vitamins is only because we've been working our asses off for 30 years. Hans Nieper was the one that says there is zinc. That I was at the beach. Everyone can see my beautiful tan. I put zinc oxide on my it prevents skin cancer.
Sure.
And that's a cheap chelate.
Yeah.
Zinc orotate is going to go into my prostate and make sure I don't get prostate cancer. Oh, by the way, did we mention that's another one of our epidemics?
Oh, sure.
But it's not an epidemic that incapacitates. Prostate cancer, you can live with it for 5 years before it finally kills you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the same thing with Alzheimer's. That we know that there's Dr. Bradenson at the Buck Institute has done the data that shows those older people that have developed Alzheimer's, right, have an uncomfortable association with long-term statin use. Well, that study wasn't going to be done as long as the money machine was in work. Is that unethical? There are a lot of things. What's the purpose of this? Love Whole Foods as a commitment to the community, and we've been open 24/7, 7 days a week, and with the exception of the one, we have 65 employees. One suffers from anxiety, and she comes in before and after the store closes. She still works, so I guess it's all 65, right? I'm very proud of the fact that in the food desert that came out of the results of the social upheaval, that one of the reasons why blacks, for example, are at higher risk wasn't just that they have more diabetes. Mm-hmm. They live in environments where the food that they're getting doesn't even come close to this. Antibiotic-free, ice cream.
They're exposed to far more toxins from our man-made foods.
And then I might also add, there's another one. We mentioned the zinc and the quercetin. Quercetin is an isophore. Pauling won a second Nobel laureate because what really kicked open the cells to be able to poison cancer cells was adding quercetin
to the vitamin C.
And through the vitamin C, it's a form of vitamin C, but it's an ionophore, which again, selenium. Yeah. We knew in the 1950s that 200 micrograms of not just selenium. It was selenium with a methyl group. It's selenium methylthione. That's the one that prevents about 90% of the cancers that we all think about, right? But the selenium's not in the food. Why isn't it in the food? Because Quaker Oats decided that they wanted quick oats that you could cook in literally 10 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the only trouble is to make that they had in where you come from, they wouldn't even eat it because they'd say, what is that? Right? And all it is a highly refined oat flake that it's all starch. It doesn't have any nutrients.
No, they're all deprived from nutrients. Most starches, all white products are deprived. So what we learned today, I think, Mitch, is that number one, yes, there's drugs, they have their place, but for each drug, there's a natural alternative. And especially when we're talking about prevention or when we're talking about mild to moderate cases, why not try the St. John's wort? Why not try the quercetin, the vitamin C, the vitamin D3 with decay? Why not try those things first before taking a drug? The drugs also, like you said, they're singled out, and therefore they have, limited effects on the body, while our whole foods have hundreds and hundreds of cumulative effects and participate in millions of chemical reactions in the body. A drug will not do that, right? And so what we wanted to do today is educate the people, is really don't take those, studies for granted, especially the drug studies, because I hear it all the time. Whatever you're selling and promoting, like I need to make $5 on a supplement, I really don't. But whatever you're selling and promoting is for your own financial gain. We get that. I get that all the time. You're pandering this supplement. First of all the profits of my books and my supplements, they go to charity, so nobody can say that. But I'm not pandering them because your drug or the drugs of the pharmaceutical companies are many times done by the beneficiary, and there's only a few studies that have been manipulated and pandered with. Because we know that after stage 4, when they come on the market, almost 50% of the drugs get immediately taken off the market. And they were supposedly tested to 4 stages. I can go on each stage and tell you what's happening, but that's for another time. But what people don't realize is, and Mitch have said it many, many times, go to PubMed and do your search on omega-3 and vitamin C and CBD and cannabis and anything you want to know, and selenium and those things, and you will get thousands of results. Not some study that was done here at my house. No. Peer-reviewed studies published on PubMed, but you're not willing to look.
Or Lancet or New England Journal.
Peer-reviewed,
right?
Yes.
Any of the major
Peer-reviewed. So it's not that the studies are not there. In the 1800s, mid-1800s, the pharmaceutical industry, started. In the 1900s, they took control of our medical system, and our medical system is based on drugs and some surgeries. And they pushed what they call alternative medicine to the side. It's not alternative medicine. They are the alternative medicine, because plants and foods and supplements have been around for thousands of years. This is the original medicine. They have pushed it away. They took it out of our medical system.
And Mike, you know that we're on the same page on that. I'm just looking in my 71 years, the social chaos that we're seeing in the larger corporeal environment of America, I've never seen anything like it. What I'm hoping is that from this chaos, that we make decisions like you're saying, that where we to say, eating at home wasn't such a bad idea.
Yeah.
I'm using it as one example.
Yeah.
And then if you're going to go and make a seafood dish, I don't really want to eat farm-raised salmon.
I want wild caught.
I want a wild-caught salmon, not only because it tastes better, but that whole idea that it's color, the sign says color enhancement added, it isn't better living through, is not fitting my idea that I want to restore the mind-body balance, doing exercise, probably the greatest secret to longevity and health. You've written a whole book just on that. And then, of course, the whole mind aspect of being able to make an informed decision. I don't want anyone listening to this, and because I agree with you. If I'm in a car accident, give me morphine if that's what's going to keep me from going into a coma. Whatever. But that's not how we deal with life on a day-to-day basis. How do we keep the sanctity of our internal universe, and let's translate it to the external universe? We're not doing plastic tea sacks anymore. I showed you that picture of the tea sack that looked like the iceberg. But we now know, for example, that Sahara Desert dust is coming across. Well, why is it coming across? Because the African continent is being inundated with a drought. Well, what's going to happen? Are those people worried about COVID virus? They're just trying to survive, right? So what happens, in our community, what happens in the Black community, if we want to focus on that, has direct impact on our community. And how do we resolve it? Just treat everyone the way that you would want, and also treat your body so that it can output your ultimate vitality. And then what I want is health, wealth, and happiness. It's real simple.
That's what we all want. And it's all there for us to grab. We just got to get more educated and really take control of our own health. Yes, we can get advice from this person, and that person, but you need to take control of your own health. That's the only thing you can do these days.
And the end result is we'll keep having these conversations and we keep kicking it up a notch. And then ultimately these issues will fall away from the fact that we solved it internally, and we will outpicture it in a positive attitude that says, I want to treat my neighbor as I want to treat myself. I want access to the same food my grandparents had, because they made it easily to 100 years, and they had all their body parts.
Yep, that's right. No, I agree 100%. Thank you very much, Mitch, for being here again. A great discussion. Hopefully people got away with the big message that we wanted to deliver. People like Mitch, myself, and many other health advocates, in this community and any other community are there for you to help you and get advice and give you the education that you need. Thanks again for listening. Always choose health freedom.
Thanks, folks.